this month's episode of A Dram and a Drash. This month I'm bringing you something a little bit different. Over these last few months, actually, as a theme running throughout this first season, I've highlighted a particular whiskey several times with different guests, different reasons for it. We've looked at Milk and Honey from Tel Aviv. I've just come back from our congregational trip to Israel, literally just a few days ago, and have been editing something that I did on location at the M&H Distillery there in Tel Aviv. It was particularly exciting to be there because it was just a few weeks after M&H had won Best Single Malt World Whiskey for their Elements Sherry expression. And we had actually had a chance to taste that with the group traveling with us before we left for Israel. But there we were on location at the distillery. Now, we were actually there not for a podcast, not for an interview. We were there for a tasting experience and for a tour around the distillery, which was really wonderful. We got to try a lot of their primary expressions and something very special right out of one of the casks. I wasn't able to film that, obviously, because that's part of the experience you have if you get to visit the M&H distillery. But I was able to have a conversation and a little bit of an interview with our guide for the evening. So that was Ron, and he was really very gracious and delightful. He was not particularly expecting this little interview to take place, but we were able to set it up. It was set up rather quickly. You'll see from the way it was filmed. I had a little bit of a portable travel podcast recording kit with me, but it was literally set up in about 7 minutes flat. The video and the sound and the levels, and so it's a little rough and ready, but the content of the conversation and what we learn about the whiskey while we're there, that's really the essence of this month's episode. I have something just as an introduction before we get to the recording itself in my hand. Some of the bottles behind me are ones that I've highlighted previously. The Single Cask Nation. This was from our second episode, their bottling of an M&H whiskey. That was one of their single casks. And then this was what I brought out to taste at the very introduction of last month, the Elements Sherry Cask Finish, which is the one that won these awards most recently. And this is a new one that I brought back with me, something that's a little harder to find over here, part of the art and craft limited releases from M&H. So this is a whiskey that is finished in a double bock or double bock beer finish. So what does that mean? What they did is they took some of their ex-bourbon casks, they gave it to a very well-regarded Israeli brewery. There's also been an explosion of the microbrewery world in Israel. That's also something that's really exploded on the scene in the last 10 to 15 years. So Haaretz Brewery, they matured their double bock beer in these casks for about 4 to 6 months, and then they returned the cask to M&H. M&H put their whiskey in those barrels, and they sat in there for 3 years. One of the barrels that went into the final blend, one of those casks spent some time at their Dead Sea location, and you'll hear during the interview one of the really interesting things that M&H is doing is they're taking advantage of the fact that there's so many different climates in such a small country, and they have barrels that are being aged in different climate ecosystems, one of them being the Dead Sea. So let's take a little look at this M&H Art and Craft double bock or double bock finished whiskey. First of all, the color on this, it really is like honey. It's such a beautiful golden color. It's like a rich golden color. And what I get when I'm smelling this honey comes through the sort of honey, like wildflower honey, and a little bit of fresh, crisp apple notes, and a little toffee in there. Those are some of the initial notes that I'm getting just when I smell, and then when I take my first taste, What I'm getting from that immediately, it's a medium body. There's quite a lot to this. It's got um, a wonderful finish on it, but I'm getting a lot of orange peel. Quite different, actually, from what I picked up when I was just nosing it. Orange peel and dark chocolate, which is always a wonderful combination. That's what comes through the most. Um, but as the intensity of that kind of fades away, what I'm left with is another layer of interesting notes. Just a tiny bit of mint, not a lot, but just a little bit there on the palate, and also kind of mushy banana. It's not in a super pungent banana way, but just a little bit of that kind of the sweetness that you get when the banana gets a little mushy, and a little bit more of the chocolate is there. So it's just a very lovely whiskey. Again, one of the things that I'm going to pick up in the interview is that while M&H has been doing a whole lot of experimentation, all different kind of barrel finishes, a really intelligent and sophisticated way of blending to create a beautiful balance. Even in the whiskeys that are advertised with a particular finish, it's not taking all the whiskey and putting it in a particular kind of barrel for 3 months. It's a much more sophisticated process than that. All of these different climates that they're using, there is underlying all of these different styles that they're experimenting with, a kind of underlying distinctive note to their whiskey. And again, during the interview, we learn a little bit about where that might be coming from, how that's part of the intentional design of their whiskey. So, with that, I'm going to take you on a little trip to Israel this month, and we're going to pay a visit to M&H Distillery in Tel Aviv. Welcome to a Dram and a Drash. I am here at the Milk and Honey Distillery in Tel Aviv. Here is our guide, Ron. We're so grateful to have you with us this evening. And I'm here with members of Congregation B'nai Shalom and Congregation B'nai Torah. We have a dram in hand. We're going to have our very first taste here of Milk and Honey Whiskey. So I'm going to hand over to you to tell us about our first taste.
Thank you very much. And before we start tasting, let's think about how we taste a whiskey, okay? Because usually when I pour a whiskey to someone, he does this, okay? That's too much for me. It's still early, not 8 o'clock. Because I always say that when we try a whiskey, it's like a first date. We see who's in front of us. Same with whiskey. We see the color of the whiskey. The darker the color, we would think it's what? Sweeter, right? Or bitter, more something. This is why it helps us sell more. And this is why most of the Scottish distilleries paint their whiskeys. We believe that the whiskey should stay in a natural color. We keep it the same as it goes out from the cask, have no additives and anything. And the next is the taste and the smell. When I taste, I can define between 5 different tastes: sweet, sour, bitter, salty, and umami. But when I smell, I can smell much more. You heard people describe a whiskey, say it's grassy. I smell the spring, I smell roasted almonds. There are none of those things inside the whiskey, but why do people smell those? They smell those because they think. They try to remember what they smelled before. When you say it feels like home, it smells like home, nobody took your home, cut it into pieces, and put it in your spaghetti and meatballs. You just get the notes that reminds you of home. You can all take your left cup. The left cup is our first drink for tonight, in the middle, and smell it. What do we smell? It's sweet, it's sour, what's more?
Sweet.
Sweet, okay. Alcohol as well.
Vanilla.
I always get some caramel or honey notes in this one. And this is the classic. Classic is our home whiskey, and I always describe our classic as a table whiskey, okay? Because every time I put it on the table, the bottle ends. And this is what we wanted to achieve here in the classic. Something that is easygoing, nice, smooth, but still 46 alcohol percentage. Still a bit with more character, and you would feel it, some finish. And aside to the classic, I gave you the brie cheese. The brie cheese is, you have one side with yellow cheese, the brie is at the other side, okay? The brie cheese would contrast with the classic. The classic is sweet, the brie is a bit bitter, okay? It helps us get some more notes from the whiskey. So cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers, everyone.
I am.
After the first taste, you can add few drops of water with your pipetta. The pipetta is this plastic thing between your cups. You can add a few drops of water, it will open up the whiskey.
And while you're doing that, let's talk a little bit about what makes this Israeli whiskey. You've given us a little bit of a preview in the presentation earlier about the process here at M&H, but there's still a little bit of a mystery because barley doesn't grow so well here. No, not so much maltings, but nevertheless, this is a distinctly Israeli whiskey. So what would you say are some of like the highlights of what makes this an Israeli product?
So the longest part of the whiskey making is the aging process, that's for sure. And because of the interesting and unique climates that we have here in Israel, where temperatures in the summer go up to 40 Celsius degrees in Tel Aviv and very humid, but in the winter we're talking about around 10 Celsius degrees and very dry. Makes the cask evaporate much more liquid, makes the liquid inside the whiskey, inside the cask, very, very unique, much more mature for a young age.
And you were telling us also earlier about the fact that we have casks in different climates all over Israel.
Exactly.
And so I know if we were in Kentucky or even in Scotland, people would be telling us that in this particular warehouse, that there's like the place where they know to go for the honey barrel, like this place in terms of how high it is, the humidity, the temperature, like this is where they know to find the best whiskey. Do we have like the sweet spot? Have we discovered like one place that's like the magic barrel location?
So Dr. Jim Swan called Israel the playground of the whiskey world. You have so many climate zones, so many maturation regions in such a small territory. Tel Aviv is very different from the South Galilee or from the Dead Sea. What we do is putting warehouses in different places around Israel. Most of the casks are here in Tel Aviv. The other half all around Israel, and we try and experiment with different climates. To be honest, we're still learning. We're still trying to understand where it would be better to which cask, and the more we develop, the more the distillery gets big. We get, let's say, interesting results and understand how we can make the best whiskey for you to drink.
So we're still learning, but each climate, I know you talked about the Dead Sea, Apex is
the
like
Dead Sea would
something is unique about there versus here.
The Dead Sea may be the most unique climates around the world. Okay, temperatures going up to 50 Celsius degrees, below 10 in the winter, very high barometric pressure, pushes the liquids on the side of the cask, makes us lose the highest Angel's share that was ever measured. We're talking about 25% of Angel's share per year.
Which is amazing.
This is a lot.
Yeah.
We age it for part of the time there, and another part in Tel Aviv, gets very mature results in this short period of time, and make an interesting whiskey in this time.
Thank you. But I think also you're asking that, you know, when it comes straight out of the cask here, particularly in a climate like this, it's often like 61, so even 64%. I have a cask strength.
We put it in a cask, it's 64 ABV,
but
take it out around 67 because of the dry winter.
Percent of alcohol straight out of the barrel. And that's usually not what it's bottled at.
ABV is alcohol by volume.
Yeah.
We put it inside a cask at 64 alcohol percentage. That's 128 proof. And then we take it out. It's around 67 alcohol percentage, 134 proof. And then we dilute it to the right amount that we want. We dilute it with our own unique water, the water that we make with the reverse osmosis technique. And then each whiskey has its own unique alcohol percentage that complements it with taste. Yeah. So should we go to the next whiskey?
Sure.
Perfect. And whiskey 2, 3, and 4 are from the Elements series. The idea in the Elements series, okay, is to be half what we have in the classic, bourbon casks and STR casks, which will give us the balance. The other half is the cask that is being shown on the label. In the second bottle, we're talking about Israeli red wine casks, red wine from wineries like Vitkin, Tepperberg, Recanati, and Tulip, and we mostly use the Carignan grape. Carignan is a regional grape where you get more fruity notes from the wine. If you'd smell the second whiskey, you get something oaky, something fruity, a bit, let's say, bitter notes. On the taste, it reveals something sweet, and in the finish, even some red fruits, some nuts.
Yeah.
And we chose the Israeli red wine to be with camembert cheese with walnuts inside, with pecan nuts inside. Okay, the nuts get very noticeable with the red wine, and then we get the sweet notes of the wine, the red fruits that I said earlier. So cheers.
L'chaim. And these Israeli wineries that you mentioned, I know M&H is happens to be it's a kosher product, so
Yes.
it means that it can be drunk by all kinds of Jews, and so that means that the red wines also have to be kosher, right? And,
Exactly.
and when we get to the sherry, I know there's an interesting story. It's not so easy to find kosher sherry.
Yeah, when we use Israeli red wine casks, it's easy to find kosher red wine. But when we wanted to find a kosher sherry barrel, it was pretty hard, okay? So what we needed to do is sending Barcelona's main rabbi to a cooperage called Jose Luis Rodriguez Cooperage, make the cask kosher, then send it to a bodega called Bodega del Pino in Spain. This is the only bodega to make a kosher sherry now, a project that we started with them. And then they send us the used cask. This is the only kosher whiskey in sherry barrels. Very interesting, very unique, and later we would find it as the best in the world.
Yes, we'll talk more about that. It's a fantastic process, the care that went into sourcing that. And as you said, not just what the liquid in it, but also even the barrels. The way barrels are put together is a process in which if you want to have that stamp,
Yes.
every step of the way has to be done just so.
Of course,
Yeah.
some people would care about it, some not. As a new product from Israel, it was important for us to be kosher.
Right, right. Wow. So I know we're going to taste a third one in just a little bit, but I know as we talked about the Sherry Whiskey World Whiskey Award, best single malt in the world, and then also about a week later, double gold in San Francisco. So incredible. What's it feel like here? I mean, obviously there must have been a big party. Probably a little bit of whiskey was drunk. But what does it mean, do you think, to really have put Israeli whiskey on the map? I mean, now the world is talking about Israeli whiskey. What's that conversation like here?
So, in Israel, whiskey is not a big thing. Okay, Israelis like to drink wine, like to drink beer. Okay, they are not such a big whiskey drinkers. This is why most of our products are being sold worldwide. We get a lot of cheer from crowds everywhere. If it's the US market as well, and now the Israeli market started to grow because of the winning, because of everything. It really helps us by selling and by introducing everyone to our product, because well, it's a good product in my opinion.
Me too. That's why we're here. That's why we're here.
So wine casks are not that common in the whiskey world. We're not the first to use them, but let's say that most of the distilleries will not put out expressions in wine casks because of the good Israeli red wine. We wanted to say, okay, we can have a good product with a unique cask that is being made in Israel, with a unique wine that is aged inside this cask. The Carignan grape helps it, makes the wine very, very fruity and makes the whiskey fruity as well. Right. Yeah, we buy the casks from wineries in Israel, age our whiskey inside it, and then take it out.
Yeah. you'll tend to find it more in places where there's already a good quality and a well-known wine industry. So, for example, there's a Starwood in Australia, which is an Australian whiskey. They have a red wine finish. Well, we know there's great wines out of Australia, right? And now there's some micro distilleries out on the West Coast in California. They're using red wine barrels from the California, Napa Valley wine region. So if they've got access, you'll find it in a few more places, but this is one that's at the lead of that kind of
From
release.
Scottish distilleries, it would be mostly in limited series,
Right.
and not a permanent one. Each cask gives us unique palates. Some casks can be used more than once, and we can get more notes after it was emptied and filled again. Some casks would be too exhausted, and we say, okay, that's enough for now. And maybe we'll age something else inside the cask and age again a whiskey, or we would sell it for the highest bidder. Should we go to the third one? So the third whiskey, the one we all waited for, okay? Our Elements Sherry, the best whiskey in the world, okay? First, before we start tasting it, I'll say this is not my favorite from those four, okay? To be honest. And that's the fun thing about whiskey. There is a sentence on the wall, everybody loves whiskey, some haven't found the whiskeys they love yet. The more you taste whiskey, you understand what you like and what's your vision about whiskey, okay? And I, for example, like red wine barrels, white wine barrels. Sherry are a bit too sweet for me, because the sherry is a sweet wine from Jerez in Spain, okay? It's a wine made out of grapes, not cherries, not cherry tomatoes or anything. I heard everything. It is a sweet wine from Jerez. The name is a mistake, because in England it was very familiar. They were very familiar with the sherry wine, the sweet wine from this area. The one that came from Portugal, from Porto, is being called port. The one that came from Jerez, they wanted to call it sherry, but they couldn't. They're English. It turned to be sherry. This is why the name is sherry, okay? And sherry wine is very, very familiar in the whiskey world, okay? Because it was we could find it easily in England. A lot of whiskey distilleries in Scotland age their whiskey inside sherry barrels, giving us some chocolate notes, some cocoa, I'd say some tobacco leaves on the palates. Nice, smooth finish, and a good whiskey. With the Elements Sherry, we put the Scent More cheese, okay, with chestnut coal outside of it, okay. We would get it similar to the chocolate notes, and then the sweet notes from the sherry wine would be more noticeable.
One of the things I love this, I have to say, it's so smooth. It's so beautifully balanced. But one of the things that I've noticed now, sort of tasting the full range of elements, first of all, I know a lot of whiskey distilleries, they take their whiskey and they finish it for the lot, like they take the whole batch and they finish it for a few months in whatever the wine or the sherry barrel. And I don't think M&H does that. It's a little bit of a blend, right?
Yeah,
they take just an element like in that.
Different types of barrel. For example, in this Elements Sherry,
right,
we're talking about ex-bourbon barrels.
Yep.
We're talking about ex-sherry barrels, full maturation.
Yes.
Some ex-sherry barrels that were only for a finish. That
right.
means ex-bourbon barrels went into a sherry finish.
Right.
And some STR barrels as well. STR is a method to refabric red wine casks that Dr. Jim Swan had invented. Okay. It stands for shaved, toasted, and recharged. You take a red wine cask, shave from the inside, toast, and then rechar again.
Right.
You get a thinner amount of wood, which helps us age the whiskey faster in hot climate. Makes it, you can fill the climate much easier, and it's like a trick to make some more balance and to get some more, let's say, mature notes into the whiskey.
Right. But one of the things I've noticed, because now aside from the core range, I also have some single barrel releases from the Single Cask Nation that have worked extensively with you, Impex, and also Jews and Booze, Joshua Mann, who has brought in single barrels to the States directly from M&H. Pomegranate wine finish and white port finishes. So you have all of these different finishes, all of these different experiments, but there's like a style that is sort of consistent even with all of these different finishes, which says something about the quality of the distillate. Even as much as the climate and the barrels all make a difference, there's something about the distillate, the spirit itself, that is clearly a quality that sort of runs through the whole range. So,
I'll explain it like this.
yeah.
Because of the short maturation process, the spirits must be the best, okay? Because the cask would affect it, but less, because you're not aging it for too long. This is why our stills have a unique design, not very unique, but it's points down. The line R points down.
Okay.
This way, the molecules go up, the eteric oils go straight into the condenser, and then you get more fruity notes. If
Yes.
you point up, then it would go back and forth.
Right.
And then you would get less notes. It would be easier to drink, but you would not have the M&H DNA inside every drink.
Right.
This is
But you've got that intensity of what's happening in the barrel that will help to sort of soften
Exactly, that's
that
for sure.
intensity. Yeah, wow. So that's what's underlying it. We have one
So,
more.
yeah, so let's taste the forced whiskey. Okay. After it, we're gonna vote. And the forced whiskey is our element peated. Peat is a kind of a land, okay? It grows in Scotland, in Japan and Australia, and even in Israel, in the Hula Valley, for example.
We have peat here.
In peat,
Wow.
you have peat in Israel.
Wow.
But when you dry the barley with peat, you get smoky notes to the whiskey. And I always joke that the element peated is the whiskey that is good for Purim, okay? It's a whiskey in disguise. You smell it, you don't get too much peat, too much smoke. You taste it, not too much smoke as well, but the peat comes in the finish. In the aftertaste, it's like it was late for the party. You get it, and the long finish, nice, smooth. It's not a peat monster. It's an easygoing peat, and I always say it's a good whiskey for those who are not yet into the peated world. Cheers.
L'chaim, everyone. Oh yes, yeah. It's all about the finish. This comes through in the finish. Yeah.
Stays with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I think I've had two kinds of M&H peated expressions.
Okay.
I think there was one where the Czech barley had been peated and then brought over for the distillation process.
Yes.
And I've had another M&H where an unpeated distillate was placed in a Lafroig barrel.
So in this
So
one,
what do we have here? Yeah.
so in this one, it's a combination of ex-bourbon barrels with an unpeated spirit,
Okay.
ex-bourbon barrels with peated Czech barley, okay, ex-Isla barrels from Lafroig in the Ardbeg,
Okay.
and some STR barrels, okay.
So it's wow.
It's a mix to make
It's that element
peat,
again.
yeah,
it's,
that element
it's subtle and it's
to make the peat only come in the finish.
Wow.
Very nice, very smooth. If we would use only peated barley, we would not get the same notes. We wanted to get it from all around.
and this is why Tomer has those awards, because
That's for sure.
that's the art of the blender. That's
Yeah.
just brilliant. Wow.
We count on him.
Thank you so much for walking us through some of the M&H whiskey range. This has been absolutely delicious. It is so exciting to be here at the distillery, tasting this on site, and thank you for walking us through such a fantastic tasting series and telling us so much about M&H whiskey. L'chaim.
L'chaim, it's our pleasure. This is the bread and butter, doing tasting events.
Thanks, everyone. L'chaim.
So I hope you've enjoyed this episode of a Dram and a Drash and a little tour
a little visit with the M&H Distillery. I'm delighted that a couple of the guests that I've interviewed in previous months, they're going to finish out the season. Rabbi Jen Gubitz and Hal Lewis, they're going to be our June and July issues. And then that's the end of season 1. And I'm looking forward to starting to line up some fresh interviews over the summer to launch season 2 in September. Some of the things that I hope will be coming up once I line up some of these interviews. While I was in Israel, I took advantage of trying to experience a little bit more of the new-ish Israel whiskey scene, brought back a bottle of Slingshot and also brought back a bottle of Thinker's bourbon that actually is legitimately bourbon. It was distilled and put in cask in Ohio in the United States. It has been aging in Israel. And so more on that to come. And of course, interspersed with the episodes that focus on the whiskey makers will be the episodes that also bring to light wonderful conversations with Jewish professionals who happen to like whiskey. So we get to learn a lot more about what's out there in the Jewish world and the kinds of experiences that people are having, the kinds of experiments people are doing, and the ways people are thinking about Jewish life, Jewish culture, Jewish ideas. So I hope you'll stay with me through to the end of this season, and looking forward to what's still to come ahead as we prepare for season 2. But for now, l'chaim.